G'day ladies and gentlemen, ScottyD here from the Australia's Tabletop Wargaming Network, and welcome back for another installment now From Sprue, the Tabletop series. Alright ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the ATWN for another From Sprue to Tabletop video where we talk about how to get your miniatures from the sprue, get them painted, get them based, and get them on the tabletop so you're able to be playing your games of Warhammer 40k or any other miniature war game that you might enjoy playing. And today's video is going to be looking at restoring miniatures, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about what that entails later on in this video. But before we do so, I want to thank everyone who has been supporting us over here on YouTube, those who've been liking our videos, commenting, and also those who have been subscribing to the channel, making sure you got that notification bell on as well. Really appreciate your guys' support over here as we continue to grow the network and the reach that we have within the wider hobby community as well. So without further ado, let's jump into talking about how to go about restoring your miniatures. Now, depending on whether you've got a bunch of older miniatures from many years ago, like myself, that you've maybe have just had sitting there that you haven't had a chance to get to and you're wanting to restore, or maybe you've purchased some miniatures secondhand and you're wanting to bring a new lease of life to them for your army. Restoring miniatures can take some time and effort when you want to actually restore them to the quality level that you are after, and the effort you put in will be determined by the amount that you actually need to do to them in order to be ready for you to actually work on them yourself. Now, for this video, I myself have got a whole host of older orc miniatures from back in 5th edition. Majority of them are from the old Assault on Black Reach box set with a couple of additional box sets in there as well. I think I got some extra knobs and another unit of 20 boys there as well that we're going to be restoring, which is going to be really great to see. Now, what I'll need to do will depend on each miniature, as there are some that will just need their mold lines removed and to be rebased, whereas others will need to be fully stripped of their paint. They'll need to have their mold lines cleaned and be put on bases as well. You know, for yourself, if you get miniatures secondhand, maybe they break in transit or anything like that, which does happen and it is unfortunate. But if it does happen, you know, that's another step that you have to be mindful of when you are going about restoring miniatures. So I'm going to be starting off by stripping the paint off the orc miniatures that need the paint to be removed, as I'm going to be bringing a new lease of life on these guys when I am painting, and it's about half of them that need to be stripped. Now, there are a ton of different products out there that you can go about using to actually strip the miniatures. You know, there's a couple of different ones that a lot of the community like to lean towards, you know, isopropyl alcohol, or my personal favorite is Simple Green. That is my go-to. And so I grab a couple of Simple Green concentrate bottles from my local hardware store, which is called Bunnings here in Australia. I grab a couple of 1 liter concentrate bottles. I don't water it down at all. I just pour that into a container and then I place the miniatures inside. Now, this won't have any negative side effects on plastic miniatures or metal miniatures. However, it will soften any fine cast resin miniatures if you leave them in there for more than a couple of days. So bear that in mind. So after putting all of these miniatures in the Simple Green, life got a bit crazy for me, I'll be honest. And between traveling for work trips, tournament coverage, and everything else that I do and have going on, these miniatures were actually sitting in the Simple Green concentrate for about a month or so before I was able to get back to them and actually clean them up. And so once I had the chance to actually spend time clean them, I did so. I'm very fortunate that I have a metal sink in my kitchen, so that's where I decided I was going to clean them up. Always recommend cleaning them in a metal sink and metal basin rather than going to a porcelain basin if you can avoid it when you are doing this, as well as you don't want to stain the porcelain. Now, the way you go about cleaning the paint off of the miniatures you've had sitting in the Simple Green or whatever other paint stripping solution you have is to grab an older toothbrush and to go about scrubbing that off. Or if you want to invest in an ultrasonic cleaner, you can do that as well, and that will help. There's multiple applications for the ultrasonic cleaner. One is cleaning resin pieces and such as well, but you could use it for cleaning miniatures that you are wanting to strip as well. But if you do disagree with that, let me know down in the comments as well. I'm a bit hazy on that one, not 100% certain if it's good or not, so let me know. I'd also highly recommend, if you're doing the toothbrush method, to wear gloves when you're doing this, because when you do larger batches of miniatures, you're going to be working with running water a lot. You're going to be scrubbing these miniatures and getting the paint off them. you're going to be there for a little bit of time. And so you're going to want to make sure that you don't get absolutely crinkly and skin falling off your fingers from just the exposure from the water and the simple green and such, and have to deal with that. So gloves is definitely recommended. But considering I've only got about a batch of 25 miniatures, I've decided that for this, I'm not going to do that. In hindsight, maybe I should have, but that is what it is. So now how I actually go about cleaning the miniatures is that I actually pick each model out of the simple green solution. I dip the old toothbrush in the simple green itself, and then I start scrubbing away on the miniatures and try and get as much scrubbed off as I can before I get to the point where I actually need to rinse the model under the running water and then continue scrubbing to get as much off as possible, usually using a 360 anti-clockwise scrubbing motion. Usually worked quite well, I found, and so I was able to get a fair amount of paint off a lot of the miniatures as well. Then I rinse them off and I sit them on an old tea towel so they're able to have all the water dry, and just air dry them on the kitchen bench beside the sink. And so over time, they'll air dry and get rid of all the water and such as well. Now, this step of restoring miniatures will take some time. And the one thing I will say about it is you won't remove as much paint off the miniatures every single time as some of the others you will. You can get varying results from miniature to miniature. It could just be the amount of primer that's on there, maybe the style of paint you used on the miniatures or was used on the miniatures, things like that as well. So don't expect that you're going to be able to get to bare plastic for every single part of the model, every miniature. Sometimes you're going to get down to the primer, and that's going to be great. Or you may have a lot of paint still left over, but with some bare plastic in parts as well. So bear that in mind when you are doing this method when it comes to stripping miniatures. Now, once you have cleaned off as much paint as possible that easily comes off the miniatures, the next step will be to clean the mold lines if you need to. I need to go back and clean off all the mold lines of all of these orcs, whether I needed to soak them or not. So because I never cleaned them as my 14-year-old self, so now I have to go back and do that work so that there's no mold lines on the miniatures when I go to paint them up. And so I've got to go through and I've got to do it on every single miniature for about 45-ish models in this batch of orcs that I'm going to be working on. Now, I decided to clean their mold lines in batches, and I decided to start off with 10 orc boys and a couple of knobs for the 10-man unit of knobs that I have. Now, during this process, each time I completed a miniature, I would remove them from the base as well, as they were on 25mm bases, which were the old base sizes, and I'm rebasing them onto 32mm bases today. This is from our sponsor for today's video, Miniature Horde. Now, when you're wanting to revitalize an army or a unit of miniatures, you may want to take their bases in a completely different direction, or you may want to align the bases with what your army's existing basing style is. And today's sponsor, Miniature Horde, have got you covered in the 3D printed resin base department. Now, Miniature Horde are a non-for-profit cooperative located in Melbourne, Australia, who actively support the Warplings Wargaming Club and stock a wide range of resin and filament printed products, magnets, magnetized cases, custom printing options, in addition to also stocking Games Workshop products. They have got a wide variety of different resin basing additions, from vegetation to animals to destroyed building pieces, and theme basing sets to suit the setting that you want to frame your entire army in for your different game systems, whether it's Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Middle-earth, or any other miniature war game out there as well. They have also got their 3D printed resin bases in all the sizes you may need for your next Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer Age of Sigmar army, with structure on the underside of the base as well, so that you can magnetize them and attach them to a magnetic tray in their magnetic storage solutions for your army as well. Now, the bases that they have provided me for my orc army are the ruined factory bases, and even without painting them, I look forward to how they'll actually come up when I'm painting up the orcs, especially when using contrast paints to get different tonalities in the dirt and the mud and all the different effects that I want to have on their bases to really make them pop nicely along with the orcs as well. If you're looking to support an Australian gaming store that also supports their local gaming community, then make sure to check out the link that is down in just the description below and check out all the different products that they have available. And thank you so much to Miniature Horde for sponsoring today's video. So after I've cleaned off all the mold lines off these orcs, then it's actually time to rebase them on their new 3D printed bases. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this, whether you want to do pinning and pin them into the bases, or just gluing them on with super glue, which I've heard has mixed results. Or the method that I've chosen to use some epoxy resin to glue them on instead, and they're not going to be moving anywhere. So I've decided to use some 5-minute epoxy resin here so that I'm able to have a secure bond for the lifetime that these miniatures are going to be used in games. Now, the important thing to remember is that if you are working with any kind of resin, whether it's epoxy resin or the resin bases, you want to make sure you've got the right protective equipment on hand, along with a face mask, and working in a well-ventilated space. You know, working with 2-part epoxy resin, making sure that I'm only mixing up a small amount as I need to, using cotton buds to actually apply it onto the bases. Now, before I glue them onto their bases, I actually test out some different positions for the orcs on their respective bases to ensure that I can place them in a logical place where they're going to get enough support when I do glue them onto the bases as well. And once I've figured out like a 3 to 4, I'll grab the epoxy and I'll get that ready. Now, I'm using an old basing material container that I'm putting the epoxy resin into, and I'm mixing it up using some cotton swabs, and then using that same cotton swab to apply it onto the feet of the orcs, and then gluing it onto the new bases for them. Some of them needed to be leaned up against something to stop them from heeling over or leaning over, or just completely falling over entirely and disconnecting from the base. Whilst the resin did set, but most of them ended up being able to work out fine as the resin was setting quite quickly. So I had to do multiple batches of resin to put them onto the bases. So it did take a little bit of time. Now, with the epoxy resin setting in 5 minutes, it does mean that I only need to use a little bit at a time as I'm mixing it up to do those couple of miniatures every time. And once they had dried completely, they were secured and they were not going anywhere from their bases, which is really great. So whilst it does take a little bit of time to restore your miniatures that do need it, whether you've got them sitting in your pile of grey plastic that you need to get to, or if you have purchased miniatures secondhand and you're wanting to restore them to paint them, it will pay off in the end. And it does take some time to do that, to get them, you know, fully painted and based, and bringing them to have a complete new lease of life for your miniature wargaming experiences and games on the tabletop with your new miniatures, or maybe even a new entire army like the orcs that I've been working on in today's video. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for our restoring miniatures from Sprue to tabletop video. We hope that you found it informative, that, you know, it gave you some ideas about how you can go about restoring miniatures. And, you know, if you haven't, you know, heard anyone speak about stripping miniatures, or, you know, cleaning mold lines and rebasing them and how to attach them to resin bases, we hope that this was an informative video for you guys, so you're able to start considering different ways that you can do your hobbying as well. As per usual, if you did enjoy the video, feel free to hit with a like. If you have any feedback, leave it down in the comment section below. And if you want to catch more content from us here at the ATWN, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn that notification bell, to be notified as to when we are releasing more content here on the network. Also, if you want to catch us live when we are working on not just the orcs, but also the myriad of other projects that I work on, as well as catch any tournament previews or live tournament coverage from us here at the ATWN, feel free to head over to Twitch as well. Drop a follow over at the Australis TWN channel, and you'll be able to catch us live over there every week, whether it's tournament previews that we're going to have the TOs on, or we're doing hobbying sessions, looking at the latest news, new releases, and such for 40K and other game systems as well. I also want to thank each and every one of our financial contributors, whether you contribute on Twitch, here on YouTube, or on Ko-Fi as well. Your financial contributions really allow us to cover our business costs and to be able to increase the quality of our tournament coverage and allow us to do a lot more in the Australian Warhammer 40K tournament scene than we are normally able to do. And I'm always super appreciative of you guys. So thank you so much for your support there on the various platforms. Also, a massive shout out to Miniature Horde for sponsoring today's video as well. They're going to be sponsoring a whole ton of our From Sprue to Tabletop videos going forward, because they actually supplied all the bases and a new container for me to put the orcs in. And so we've got some great content coming up from these guys who have provided us with the base, and I'm keen to get them all painted up and show them off to you guys over the course of the next batch of videos in the From Sprue to Tabletop series. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. I've been ScottyD, and I'll catch you in the next one.